The wind howled through the quiet colony outpost. Snow fell thick and cold over the land, and everything was silent except for the humming of a distant generator. Most houses had their doors locked and lights off. Only one old cabin at the edge of the colony still had a flickering light inside. Jack lived alone. He didn't like visitors. He didn't like noise. He just wanted peace. He had been a soldier once. He had seen too much pain, too much betrayal. Now, all he wanted was to be left alone. He sat in his old chair, drinking something warm, listening to the fire crackle. Outside, the snow kept falling, and then not happened. Knock, knock, knock. Jack froze. It was midnight. No one ever came this late. Not here. Not in this weather. Slowly, he stood and walked to the door. He picked up his old rifle, just in case. Then he opened the door a few inches. There she stood. A girl. An alien girl. She was shaking in the snow, barely dressed in scraps of cloth. Her skin was pale. Her hair was wet and long, hanging over her shoulders. Her eyes were large, glowing faintly under the snowflakes. She looked up at him with trembling lips. I can cook. I can clean. I can be quiet, she whispered. Jack blinked. For a second, he didn't know what to say. She looked so cold, so tired. She didn't beg for food. She didn't ask for money. She just offered herself as if that was all she had. He opened the door wider. Come in, he said. She stepped inside without a sound. The warmth of the cabin hit her like a wave. She stood just inside, dripping snow onto the wooden floor, not daring to move further. Jack shut the door behind her and took a step back, watching her carefully. Sit by the fire, he said. She hesitated for a moment, then moved slowly to the corner and sat down near the warmth. She didn't speak. Again. She just wrapped her arms around herself and looked down. Jack poured another cup of hot drink and placed it in front of her. She looked at it like it was magic. Drink, he said. She picked it up with both hands and sipped carefully. Then again, and again. Jack saw her eyes close just a little, as if she was finally feeling warmth after years in the cold. What's your name? He asked. She looked up, scared. I don't know if I should tell you. He nodded. All right, I won't ask again. They sat in silence. The fire crackled. He looked at her carefully. She wasn't human, but she looked almost like one, just different. Her eyes were too big. Her ears had small points. And her skin had faint markings like old ink patterns. But she was young. Maybe 20, if her kind counted years like humans did. Her hands were bruised. Her knees were scraped. Her clothes were torn. Jack didn't ask questions. Hey, he had learned not to. He had seen enough broken people to know the signs. After a long time, she whispered again. I can stay quiet. I don't need much. Just, please don't throw me out. Jack looked at her. He didn't know what to say. A part of him wanted to send her away. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want to get involved. But another part, the older part, the human part, couldn't say no. You can sleep here tonight, he said. That's all I can promise. She nodded quickly. Thank you. Jack gave her an old blanket. He placed it near the heater. She didn't ask for a bed. She didn't take off her boots. She wrapped herself in the blanket like a ghost hiding from the world. He lay in his bed, a tea, but he didn't sleep much that night. He kept listening for any sound from the corner. There was none. She truly was quiet. The next morning, Jack woke early. When he entered the small kitchen, he stopped. The girl was already awake. She was cleaning the floor, the table, the dishes. She looked up, startled. I didn't touch your food. I just cleaned. Jack stood in silence. Why are you doing this? He asked. "Because I said I would," she replied softly. He nodded. Something in him shifted just a little. Jack was used to silence. He liked it. In fact, he chose this lonely life on the edge of the colony for that very reason. No noise, no drama, no people. But now, something had changed. There was someone else in his cabin. Someone who moved so softly he almost didn't hear her at all. Every morning, before the sun rose over the snowy hills, the girl was already awake. Jack didn't tell her to wake early. He didn't ask her to clean, but she did it anyway. The small wooden cabin that had always smelled of oil and dust now had the faint scent of clean wood and something warm, like fresh herbs and boiled roots. She never raised her voice. She barely spoke. She only nodded when Jack gave instructions and whispered when she needed to ask for something. Even her footsteps seemed to float over the floor. She wasn't just quiet. She was scared of being anything else. One day, Jack returned from checking the perimeter sensors. The snowstorm had made visibility worse. It had taken him hours to fix a broken antenna as he entered the cabin, boots wet and jacket heavy. He saw her again kneeling, wiping the edge of the heater with an old cloth, humming a song so softly. It was almost nothing. He paused. That was the first time he heard her hum. He stood quietly, not wanting to disturb her. The melody was simple, sad, ancient when she noticed him. She froze like a shadow caught in light. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Lowering her head, "I didn't mean to be loud." "You weren't," Jack said calmly. "It was nice." Her eyes widened a little, surprised that he didn't yell or scold her. Later that night, Jack sat at the table. She had made soup against something simple, but with flavor. He didn't ask where she learned to cook like this. He only knew one thing. It had been a long time since anyone made something for him. He looked across the table at her. She ate slowly, with small bites, never starting until he did. "You always this quiet?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Why?" She didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, she said, "Because loud girls got punished." Jack's spoon stopped in midair. She wasn't looking at him anymore. Her eyes were staring at something far away. Somewhere dark. Somewhere cold. He said nothing. He didn't need to. That night, Jack took out an old toolbox from under his bed. Inside were parts, wires, and scrap from when he used to tinker with drones. He pulled out a small motion detector and set it on the outer wall. If someone approached, he would know. He didn't trust easily. But for some reason, he didn't want this girl to disappear. Days passed. She didn't talk much, but she did more than he expected. She repaired the broken chair without being asked. She organized his storage unit. She even sharpened his knives. Jack watched her carefully. There was something different about her, not just her alien features, but her behavior. She was trained, not like a worker, more like a servant, or maybe worse. One evening, when the wind was howling and snow scratched the windows, she stood quietly near the door. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked. Jack looked up from his data tablet. "Why would I?" she lowered her eyes. "Because I don't belong here. You didn't ask for me. I came without permission." "You don't bother me," Jack said plainly. She tilted her head slightly. "That is the kindest thing anyone said to me in a long time." Jack didn't know her name. He didn't know her past. But he knew this. She was trying to disappear. Even now, living in his cabin, she acted like a shadow. As if she didn't deserve space, as if her breath was a burden. And every time she made the fire a little warmer, every time she cleaned a corner he hadn't touched in years, every time she moved without making a sound, she was doing it not for comfort, but to survive. One night, Jack had a bad dream. His past as a soldier still haunted him sometimes. Explosions, fire, screams, betrayal. He woke up sweating, breathing hard. To his surprise, she was standing quietly in the corner. Just standing. Watching. "I heard you crying," she said softly. Jack looked away, embarrassed. "It happens." She walked slowly to the kitchen and returned with a warm drink. She placed it near him, then stepped back without a word. He took it, he drank it. He didn't say thank you, but she smiled anyway. She never spoke too loud. She never demanded. But in her quiet way, she was changing something inside Jack. He didn't know how to explain it, but this girl, this silent stranger, was starting to feel like part of his life. And deep inside, he feared what would happen if someone came looking for her, because people like her didn't just wander through snowstorms. Without reason, they ran from something, and that something might still be chasing her. The fire crackled quietly in the corner, filling the cabin with soft orange light. Outside, the storm had passed, but thick snow still blanketed the land. Jack was fixing the heater wiring behind the main panel. Sparks danced as he connected two frayed wires. The system buzzed, then clicked to life. "Done," he muttered. Behind him, the girl swept the floor gently with a handmade brush. She always worked silently, almost like a ghost. But lately, Jack had noticed something new: tiny movements in her hands. Slight hesitation in her steps, like she was hiding something. She reached up to clean a shelf, and that's when it happened. Her loose shirt shifted. For just a second, Jack saw something metallic wrapped around her neck, half buried under her clothes. It was dark, rusted with blinking lights that had almost faded. A line of small, old alien script ran along the edge. It wasn't jewelry, it was a slave collar. Jack stood still, his body tensing without thinking. Memories rushed back his days as a soldier, seeing refugees in chains. Collars like this one used to control, to punish. She turned, noticing his frozen stare. Her eyes widened. Her arms flew up to cover her neck. "Please, don't touch it." "I wasn't going to," Jack said, voice calm but sharp. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for you to see." Jack took a slow breath. "It's broken, isn't it?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Mostly? Where did you get it?" he asked, his voice low. She didn't answer. She just stepped back until her back hit the wall. Her hands shook. "Did someone bring you here in that?" he asked again. She lowered her head. "No one brought me. I ran." Silence filled the cabin. Only the fire made a sound. Jack leaned against the table, his eyes still on the collar. "You escaped." She nodded. He sighed and sat down. "And now you're hiding." Another nod. Jack rubbed his forehead. "That's why you knock at strange doors. Offer to clean and cook, because you're scared of being seen." "I don't want to be caught," she whispered. Jack looked at her. "Are they still looking for you?" "Yes," she whispered, barely audible. That night, Jack didn't sleep much. He sat near the heater, holding a tool in one hand and the broken collar she'd left on the table in the other. She had taken it off, finally, a sign of trust, maybe, or surrender. The collar had scars, burn marks, welded edges. It wasn't just a tracker, it had once been a weapon, probably controlled by someone far away. Someone who still had her name, Jack. Stared into the fire. She had escaped a prison and unknowingly walked into his own loneliness. The next morning, Jack opened an old metal case from under the floor. Inside were things from his past. Maps, a sidearm, a military scanner, and his badge from the Outer Reach Peace Corps. He dusted it off. He hadn't used it in years. He turned to her. "That collar had a tracker, didn't it?" Her eyes filled with fear. "Yes, but I broke the signal, I think." He activated the scanner. Ping, something was still faintly alive in the device. "You were right to be afraid," he said. "They might still know where you are?" She sat down, hands in her lap, voice trembling. "I can leave. I don't want you hurt." Jack didn't respond right away. He just stared at the scanner screen. A soft red dot blinked. Far, but not too far. He stood. "No," he said. "If they come here, I won't run." That evening, he gave her a small come device. "Press this button if I'm not around and someone tries to enter," he explained. She took it with both hands, looking at it like a rare gift. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "You deserve safety," Jack replied, turning back to his tools as night fell again. She sat by the fire, her eyes staring into the flames. Her hands were finally still. Jack watched her from across the room. "You don't have to cook or clean," he said. "You don't have to earn your right to be here." She blinked. "No one ever said that to me before." Jack nodded. "Well, now someone has." Outside, far in the snowy hills, a faint red light blinked. A tracker signal had been found. The hunters were coming. But Jack didn't know yet, and neither did she. All they knew was that for now she was safe, and for the first time in a long time. She smiled. The snow had stopped falling. The sky above the colony was pale and empty, like a frozen breath held too long. Trees stood still, as if they feared to move. And somewhere beyond the hills, something moved in silence, something not human. Jack's scanner had been quiet all day. No red dots, no warning sounds, but he still felt it. The air had changed. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the kind of quiet that came before something bad happened. Inside the cabin, the girl was humming softly as she washed vegetables in the sink. She had taken off the slave collar. She smiled a little more now, even if only when she thought Jack wasn't looking. But her shoulders were still tight. Her eyes still glanced at the windows too often. They both knew this couldn't last forever. Later that evening, Jack climbed the watchtower behind the cabin. It was old, half-frozen, Kada and useless to most colonists but not to a former Peace Corps soldier. Through his binoculars, he scanned the snowy trail. Then he saw it, a shape, moving, too smooth to be wind, too slow to be natural. A scout drone, old model, silent, military grade. Jack's heart sank. It wasn't a random signal. Someone was looking. Someone had traced the collar's last ping. They were getting close. He climbed down and walked back inside, brushing snow off his shoulders. The girl looked up from where she was knitting a patch on his coat. "You're early," said softly. He nodded. "Get some rest. I need to check the outside alarms." But he didn't go outside again that night. Instead, he sat by the door, rifle across his lap, eyes watching the front window. He didn't sleep, and neither did the girl. Around midnight, the sensor made a soft beep. Jack leaned forward and tapped the control panel. Movement. Sector 3, 400 meters. He stood, grabbed his coat, and opened the door quietly. "I'll be back," he said. "Don't open the door for anyone but me." She didn't argue. She only nodded, like someone who'd lived this moment many times before. Jack moved like a shadow through the snow. His old training came back quickly. He stepped lightly, knees bent, rifle steady. He crouched behind a tree and waited. Then he saw them. Not one, not two. Three tall figures wrapped in thermal cloaks, moving without flashlights. Each one had a scanner in hand. They weren't regular bounty hunters. They were professionals. He recognized the style. Black Fang trackers, cold, silent, brutal. They didn't ask questions. They didn't take prisoners. And they had followed her. Jack returned to the cabin, just before dawn. His face was hard, his mind racing. She was awake, standing by the fire, holding the small emergency cum device he gave her. "You saw them, didn't you?" she whispered. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "What do they want with you?" Her eyes lowered. "I wasn't born free," she said. "My people were used by corporations, trained to obey. I escaped before they could sell me." Again, Jack's jaw tightened. "Black Fang doesn't waste time on lost servants," he said. "They only come if someone rich paid them." She nodded slowly. "I think I belonged to someone important." Jack paced the room, thinking he couldn't fight 3 trained killers not with old weapons and weak walls. But he also couldn't run. Not yet, not with her, and not with the knowledge that if she was caught again, she wouldn't survive. He looked at her. "You trust me?" he asked. She blinked, surprised by the question. "Yes," she said. "Why?" "Because I need to hide you." By afternoon, Jack had cleared out the cellar. It was cold and dark, full of dust and old crates. But he laid down blankets, food, a heater core, and a water flask. "If they come, you stay here. Number? Matter what." She nodded once, firmly. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She simply understood. That's what scared Jack the most. She had lived this kind of fear before. Too many times. That night, Jack set up tripwire alarms and redirected the heat signature sensors to false targets near the trees. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't trying to be, but this girl had whispered for shelter. And in return, he would give her something more powerful a reason to believe she was worth protecting. 3 silent shapes crept closer to the house, their scanners flashing quietly. Their weapons drawn inside the cabin. The girl lay hidden underground. Above her, Jack held his breath, finger resting on the trigger. Eyes locked on the door. The hunters had come, and Jack had made his choice. He wasn't letting her go, not without a fight. The sun rose slowly, casting long shadows across the snowy land. The forest stood still. The ice-covered trees sparkled under the golden light, beautiful but cold, hiding dangers behind their quiet beauty. Jack hadn't slept. He sat by the window, eyes heavy, rifle still across his lap. The hunters hadn't attacked last night. Maybe they were watching, waiting, measuring his response. But Jack knew how men like them worked. He had been one of them once. They never waited long. Below the cabin floor, in the hidden cellar, the girl remained quiet. She curled under the blanket, holding the small emergency device Jack had given her. She was used to being hidden. She was used to being forgotten. But this time, she wasn't hiding in fear. This time, someone was fighting for her by noon. Jack finally left his post and went down to check on her. He opened the trapdoor and climbed down carefully. The girl looked up, pale from the cold but calm. "Still out there?" she asked quietly. Jack nodded. She smiled softly. "Then I'll wait here." Jack placed a small lunch tin beside her. Inside was dried meat, a boiled root, and a hot tea flask. She opened it with care, grateful for even the smallest meal. Then, without warning, she asked, "Do you like soup?" Jack blinked. "Soup?" She nodded. "Back where I came from, before the cages, my grandmother taught me to make one special dish. It was the only thing we were allowed to keep recipes. No memories, no names, but recipes. We're safe." Jack sat on the cellar step. "What kind of soup?" She smiled faintly. "The kind that makes you remember home, even when you've never had one." Later that evening, the cabin smelled different. Not of gun oil, not of dust or burning firewood, but of spices, warm, deep spices. Something sharp, something sweet, something that reminded Jack of a place he didn't know he missed. The girl had come up just long enough to prepare one pot of that soup. She moved carefully. every step like a silent apology. But Jack couldn't stop watching her hands. She didn't just cook, she created. Every ingredient was placed with care. Every motion like she was painting something with memory. When the soup was ready, she poured him a bowl. Jack stared at it. Simple, brown with small green herbs. Steam rose into the air like a dream. Escaping, he took a spoonful. Then another. Then he froze. Something unlocked in his chest. He remembered his mother, long ago, before the war. The small cabin on Earth. The warm kitchen where she used to hum song while stirring a pot. He hadn't thought about it in years. How? Jack whispered. She didn't answer. She just sipped her own bowl quietly, as if she hadn't just reached into his soul and handed a piece back. That night, Jack didn't stand guard at the window. He sat at the table. With her, they spoke in low voices, about things that weren't dangerous. About stars, about spices, about how cold made everything taste stronger. She told him the recipe wasn't from a book. It had been passed from voice to voice, mother to daughter, in kitchens where they weren't allowed to sing, but they still cooked. Cooking, she said, was the last form of freedom they had. The next morning, Jack woke to a knock, not on the door, but on the window. Tap, tap, tap. He rolled out of bed, heart racing, gun in hand. He opened the curtain slowly. A figure stood there, one of the hunters, smiling, just standing. Not trying to enter, just letting Jack know we're still here. Jack didn't flinch. He stared back. He didn't say a word. When the girl came out from the cellar, she saw the marks on Jack's face. He was tired, but also alive, still watching. She asked. Jack nodded. They want to wait until we're weak, he said. Until I stop fighting. She walked to the kitchen. I'll make more soup, she said softly. The kind that keeps your heart warm, even when the world is cold. Outside, the hunters circled like wolves. Inside, a girl stirred a pot of memory, and Jack realized. They might take his walls, they might take his weapons, but they would never take this. The quiet gift of a forgotten recipe, and the girl who refused to let herself be erased. The sky turned silver. Not morning, not night, just the strange, a colorless quiet that came before another snowstorm. Inside the cabin, Jack cleaned his rifle for the third time that day. He didn't need to. It was already spotless. But it gave his hands something to do, something to focus on. The girl sat nearby, slowly. Sewing a patch onto a blanket, her fingers moved gently, with care. She didn't speak. She hadn't said a word all morning, but her silence was different now. It wasn't fear. It was comfort. The kind of silence you only share with someone you trust. Days had passed since the hunters were first seen. They hadn't attacked. They hadn't left either. They were ghosts in the snow, watching, waiting. Jack knew they were testing him, waiting for him to make a mistake. But something had changed in him. He no longer just wanted to protect the girl. He wanted her to stay. Not because she was quiet. Not because she could cook or clean, but because when she was near, he no longer felt like a man hiding from the world. He felt like someone worth being again. That evening, while Jack checked the perimeter sensors, he heard a sound behind him. Not footsteps, laughter, a soft, almost shy giggle. He turned sharply. She was holding a burnt piece of bread. I thought I was following your instructions, she said, still laughing quietly, but I may have used salt instead of yeast. Jack blinked. Then something strange happened. He laughed too. It was the first time she let her voice rise above a whisper. The first time Jack let his heart feel light. They sat on the floor near the fire, sharing bad bread and old stories. She told him about the stars from her home planet, how they flickered purple, how her grandmother used to sing lullabies to them as if they were watching. He told her about Earth before the wars about green. Fields, oceans, and real birds that weren't made of metal. They talked until the fire turned to ash. At one point, Jack looked at her closely. "Why do you always sit with your back to the wall?" he asked. She looked down. "Because I've been thrown against too many doors." Jack didn't speak. He only reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded blanket. He handed it to her. "This cabin is yours too now." He said, "You don't need to guard the walls anymore?" Her hands trembled as she took the blanket. "Thank you," she whispered. "I've never had anyone say that to me." The next day, she woke before him. For the first time. She walked outside. No coat, no boots, just her bare feet in the snow. She closed her eyes, tilted her head up, and let the snowflakes fall on her. Jack watched from the window. Breath held. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was feeling something. She hadn't known in years freedom, but the moment didn't last. That evening, the scanner picked up a new signal. Stronger, closer, 3 life forms. Moving fast. Jack grabbed his gear. "They're coming," he said. She nodded. "I'll go to the cellar." "No," Jack said. She looked up. "You won't hide this time," he told her. "You'll stand behind me." "With me." Her voice shook. "Are you sure?" "Yes." She stared at him. Then she stepped forward and did something she had never done before. She placed her hand on his. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. Jack looked into her eyes. Neither was he. For the first time, trust flowed freely between them. Not the kind built from fear or duty, but the kind that's earned. In quiet moments, in bad jokes and burnt bread, in shared silence. That feels like safety. The hunters were coming, but something stronger was already inside the cabin. Something that couldn't be taken by force. Trust. The storm hit harder than expected. Winds screamed through the trees like wild animals. Snow slammed against the windows. The sky turned black. Not with night, but with weight. Jack stood near the door. Rifle loaded, eyes calm. The girl stood behind him, not in the cellar, not under the bed beside him. She wore a patched coat, too big for her. Hands tucked in the sleeves. Her eyes were wide, but not with fear. Not anymore. This was her choice. She had spent her life hiding now. She was ready to be seen. They heard the first sound just after. Midnight, a click metal on ice, then silence, then another. Click, crunch. Click. Jack turned off the lights. The cabin went dark. Only the fire glowed faintly in the corner, casting shadows that danced like old ghosts. He moved slowly to the window and peeked through the side. 3 dark figures moving through the trees, each one armed, each one scanning. "They'll try to talk first," Jack whispered. The girl nodded. "Then they'll try to take me." Jack looked at her. "Not while I'm still standing." A soft knock on the door. Then a voice, cold and polite. "Good evening. We're looking for something valuable that may have wandered into your care." Jack didn't move. The voice continued. "She is property. Return her, and no harm will come to you." Still, Jack said nothing. Then he raised his rifle and fired. Not at them, but at the ice lamp above the door. It shattered with a blast, throwing sparks and flame into the snow. The hunters ducked, pulling back behind the trees. Jack slammed the door shut and bolted it. "They're not here to talk," he said. Outside, the snow was alive with movement. A red flare shot into the air. The hunters were calling for backup. Inside the cabin, Jack handed the girl a small plasma torch. "You ever use one of these?" I asked. She nodded. We were forced to learn in case our masters wanted repairs. Jack grinned. Good. Use it. Now but for yourself. He pointed to the metal shutters. Weld them shut. I'll hold the front. She nodded and went to work. Her hands were steady now, not trembling. The cabin shook with the first. Blast a stun charge hit the door, wood cracked. But held Jack fired a warning shot through the window. Then another. Outside, one of the hunters grunted and dropped to the snow, stunned by a ricochet. The others paused. One less Jack moved to reload, but then stopped. He saw something. The girl crawling under the workbench. What was she doing? She came out a moment later with something small and glowing. A power cell. A cracked one. Can we use it? She asked. Jack blinked. Where did you get that? You dropped it last week, she said. I kept it, just in case. Jack took it. He smiled. I think you just gave us our last surprise. Minutes later, a second blast rocked the wall. The door cracked open. A hunter kicked it in and stepped inside. Gun raised. Before he could speak, Jack tossed the glowing power cell. At his feet, it exploded in a blinding flash. The cabin filled with smoke. Jack grabbed the girl's hand. Out the back. He shouted. They ran through the hidden passage behind the stove. One Jack had carved long ago, in case of raids. Snow rushed in as they stumbled outside. Breath frozen in the air. They didn't run far, just enough, just to watch. The hunters entered the cabin, but they didn't expect the old fuel tank. Leaking just enough. The moment they stepped in, a spark from the burning lamp reached the fuel. Boom! The cabin shook. Flames shot into the sky like a dying star. Jack and the girl hit the ground, the heat passing over them like a second wind. They didn't speak. They just watched. The place he once called home burned. Later, when the fire was only embers, they stood on the hill together. Cold, exhausted, free. I'm sorry, she said quietly. You're home. Jack looked at her. It wasn't a home anymore, he said. Not until you walked in. She turned to him, eyes shining with tears and snow. I never meant to stay. I just needed a place to hide. And I needed a reason to live, he answered. So maybe we saved each other. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. Days passed. They left the colony behind. Together, she no longer whispered. Can cook, I can clean. I can be quiet. She laughed now. She asked questions. She told stories. And Jack listened because he no longer needed silence. He needed her in a galaxy full of walls, prisons and chains. He gave her a door, and she gave him freedom.